You don't always have the answers, but it just gives such, you do have experience, and a great coach, by the way, doesn't have great answers, they ask great questions.
Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you. You know, it's crazy. 22-time Emmy winner. You know, when I read that, I'm just like, wow, that's a bit of an overachiever right there. But, you know, given that, what drives you to continue making content? You know, a lot of people, if they had 22 Emmys and all the things that you've accomplished, they would have arrived. They would have got to the level of a career where they're just like, I just can't do more, but you're not there. So what drives you to keep going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm far from there, actually. I mean, I honestly feel like I'm just getting started, and I don't mean that cliche or arrogant. I just, things are really starting to come together because, I mean, there's no substitute for experience, right? And so, look, for me, what drives me, I mean, I'm a faith-based guy, you know, and obviously if you're not, or whoever's listening, that's okay. But my framework is like, you know, God created me to be who he wanted me to be and to fill, you know, a spot, you know, on this earth. He gave me all the parts needed for it. And I failed miserably. I'm really bad at certain things, but I found something I'm decent at. And if I don't play every day full out, like I'm not honoring what he gave me. So that's just sort of where I begin there. And then, of course, we talked briefly about it before we got on. You know, I've got a wife of, we have our 20-year anniversary coming up this year. You know, 3 kids. And I number one, I need to provide for them, of course. I mean, that's like the base need. But at the end of the day, like I want to, not only for them, but for others, I always want to be a leader and set an example of like, this is what you do. Like we, you know, I mean, one of my mentors, Dan Sullivan, says, you know, when you stop being useful, the universe wants its parts back. You know, it's sort of like, so I just want to be useful and helpful, and I think that's what I was put here to do. So, you know, for me, the inspiration really for documentaries. So I'm really a music guy. You can see some of my guitars and gold records and stuff behind me, but I really wanted to share stories that and share the wisdom and knowledge of the greatest, you know, minds and thinkers and inspirers in the world for practically free, because, you know, whether it's a download, a rental, or a streaming for free, you know, the world can now get access to the Tony Robbins of the world and the Peter Diamandises and others that, you know, before, like as a kid, I couldn't afford to go to those events. I couldn't afford to buy the $2,000 at the time CD set of Tony Robbins and all that stuff. So how can we inspire others using content? So I want to create content that leads, educates, and inspires. And there's not enough of that, and there's no shortage of sources for that. So I've got a lot of work to do.
I always crashed and burned until I stopped focusing on me and I started focusing on everybody else and giving and putting it out there. That's when everything changed. And you just said that, and I love it. But when I travel and I see speakers, or even when I'm on stages speaking, what I always remember from all the speakers that I've ever seen is not their content, not what they've done. I remember the stories, whether it's EMMY or any of the others that I've seen. It's those storytelling parts of what they're doing that you remember. With storytelling, how did you tap into this? You actually wrote a book called Story Selling. And I love that because I'm a storyteller and I think a lot of people learn from stories, but where did you hone in on that?
Well, so really, so look, I've been a songwriter. I started writing songs when I was 16. I still do it professionally. Got a bunch of stuff on Spotify that I've written for other artists, and got a song coming out on the radio in Canada in a few weeks. And so one thing, by the way, I would never have called myself a storyteller until maybe 6 months ago, because I started doing so many podcasts or maybe a year ago during COVID, right? That everyone just kept calling me a storyteller. And I just started saying, oh, you know, I mean, maybe I am a storyteller, right? But it's like these labels, these things are like, oh, that's them, that's not me, right? It's just sort of because we live inside of it, right? But so when I look back at what I mean, music has always been my like greatest drug and greatest addiction. And when you really stop and think about it, and I write a lot of country music, right? So I mean, a lot of country, pop, and rock, but particularly the storytelling in country is top notch. And when you think about it, you get 4 lines in the first verse, typically. You get 4 lines in the second verse, so that's 8 lines. You get about 4 lines in a chorus that's going to repeat. It's the same thing, more or less. So that's about 12 lines and maybe a bridge of 2 to 4 lines. So at max, you're going to get about 16 lines to immerse someone in a life situation that's believable. Now that is storytelling. That's the storytelling I respect beyond anything. And so I think I started there not even knowing it. I made my first film in 2010, my first short film, and sort of fumbled my way through it. But as I had then made a bunch of documentaries, told a bunch of stories, and I quite frankly said, I know what I'm doing and I see what's working, but I don't really know why. And so I hired a ghostwriter to sit down and research it all, and said, here's what I know and here's what I'm doing. Here's my stories. Like, find out why. So he did all the research and helped write the book, of course, and really. I learned a ton from that book, and now I teach it because I learned it about what makes stories really work. And there's multiple things, and we can go as deep as you want any of them. But number one, there's a neurochemical reaction when your brain hears a story, a well-told story. The interesting thing about stories is most people, if I were to ask, I mean, I do it all the time when I would speak live or on Zoom. Do you think stories appeal more to the left brain or the right brain? And of course, everyone thinks the right brain, the creative side, right? Not the left brain, the sort of organized, statistic, rational side. But they aren't parsing the two things, because most people think of stories as creative. Well, storytelling is creative. Coming up with a story is creative. When you're processing a story, it's actually helping your brain make sense of knowledge. When you do that and you hear a good story, your body actually releases the same chemicals that are released in like a mother's breast milk. There same chemicals released during sex or during a long hug. Like, there's literally a chemical reaction that builds trust. And so I don't know why. And by the way, I would have to look again now if it's in breast milk or not. I might have mixed that one up, but definitely sexual contact and builds trust. And it's like, okay, so I'm not arguing with that. Like, that works. And so I learned that, and like you said, I mean, they've said it forever. Facts tell and stories sell. And it's just about, stories really are just about connecting with someone on a human level. And that's why I'm fascinated by what I do. And I've done branding for a long time. I really break branding down into branding is simply storytelling. Your brand is your story. And a great brand is a story that other people want to share for you. And again, we can go as deep as you want with that, but it's that's I've learned a ton through the research of that book. And there's plot lines you can follow. There's a lot of formula to story, and it's sort of like playing a game. If you never played rugby before, or cricket is like the most confusing game in the world to me. Like, I'm from the islands and I don't get it at all. It's like when you're out, you're in. When you're in, you're out. It's so weird. And so, but you can't win a game you don't know the rules. So once you understand sort of the basic building blocks and the rules, if you will, of storytelling, there's so much freedom within the boundaries. But if you don't know the boundaries, you're gonna most likely gonna fail, because you don't know where you're gonna go off course.
When we're talking about storytelling and story selling for that matter, and how that is the one thing we usually remember when someone talks to them, how do we use the art of storytelling to actually help grow our businesses, to grow our whatever we do without kind of thinking too much about it or making the story seem too long? Because you were talking about writing song lyrics. Yep. There's only a couple lines, and you got to get that story out in just a couple lines in the song. Business owners have that same thing happening today. Back in the day, we used to call them elevator speeches, where you tell somebody what you're doing. It's kind of storytelling in a way. But today we have to do it even shorter because people's attention span is reduced because of all the social media. I mean, TikTok, you literally have 3 seconds, maybe.
Serving other people is our highest purpose. And we can do that through businesses. We can do that through nonprofits. We can do that all sorts of ways. We can do that by checking in on a loved one or a parent or whatever, right? It's just serving people. And so I think most people approach a story because they want to tell a story, right? They want to tell a story and get attention, or want people to like me, or want people to. So I think the best place to start is tell stories. Tell stories that when you tell the story, you have already determined a few things that the takeaways will be for the listener, who, without talking down to them, they will find the story useful, other than just entertaining as hell, right? And so I think if you start there, and you'll notice, once you start telling certain stories, like, people will there's a visceral reaction to a good story. Like, I live in Orlando area. I just drove down to Miami yesterday for a meeting. I was just telling you, it's about a 3.5 hour drive down. So I got down there like 8 o'clock last night, had dinner, drinks, blah, blah, blah. Woke up this morning. This podcast was my incentive to get back to my studio on time. So I rolled in like 10 minutes before. But I told a couple stories at dinner last night because a guy was flew in from Ireland, wanted to meet me and talk about doing some work together. And I told a couple stories, and like there were multiple times like, oh my, like a visceral reaction in a restaurant, like, because it was a well told story. And of course I've learned how to do that, but you also learn the ones that land and the ones that don't land, or what do I need to tweak so that are they really understanding my point? And my point really should always be, in most situations, especially in business situations, ideally more about just entertaining people. You got to earn the right to entertain people, right? I mean, that's the hardest thing about a comedian, right? You got to earn your respect before you're willing to give them a laugh. And so you got to do the same thing as a business owner, right? You got to earn their respect. So tell them a story that's worth hearing, that's helpful to them, and then you can make it funny and you can make them laugh. You can all along the way, but don't be self-indulgent, I think, is sort of the end rule. It's like, do something for them. And if the story serves them, great. And, try not to be too long-winded because some people just don't know when to stop.
Nick, you said something really important there. And that was, with the story, let's say you're meeting with a huge client, you need their business. There's so much riding on this, so many business owners or just, anyone in any capacity would go in there nervous and they would just be focusing on, all right, my product, what I have to sell this. But I have found that sometimes if you just show up and you give, I think it is one of the most powerful things you can ever give is laughter through telling a story to them. If that's how you open your first meeting with somebody, I don't care how powerful they are, it could be Elon Musk. If the first thing you do is tell a story that makes them laugh, there's an instant connection. I know this personally because those are the people I want to be around. Those are the people I want to work with. And those are the people that I want to do business with. The ones that make me laugh. Too many people think of giving as I got to give money. I got to give some, monetary value. That's giving. That's not what God says. God says giving just in an open platform. Giving is no different than making someone laugh. You don't know what somebody's day's been. You don't know if they just lost a loved one. You don't know if somebody's sick in their family. You're never going to see that from the front. But if you get them to laugh, you change the entire dynamic of that initial relationship, that initial meeting. And when that happened to me, I was purely aware that laughter and just the power of someone making you laugh is something that is literally a God-given gift. And, you're talking about that dinner story that you did and you had people laughing. And in my mind, I'm like thinking, wow, I wish I was there. And I bet you a lot of the listeners are as well.
Well, what you're really giving is you're giving joy, right? And everybody wants joy. I mean, some people can't find it and probably arguably looking, that they're looking in the wrong places for that joy, right? But so here's one for you. I am in the middle, and I'm looking for this quote on my phone because I'm not that smart. I don't remember it. But I'm in the middle of producing and directing a documentary on Dick Vitale, Dickie V, the legendary college basketball personality. For those who don't know who he is, I just interviewed Kenny Chesney on Monday. I'm interviewing Shaquille O'Neal. I'm interviewing Charles Barkley. I interviewed Coach K from Duke. I
think they know those names.
Yeah. There's something. I got LeBron James is on the list, and we're going back and forth trying to coordinate the interview. So whether you know Dickie V or not, he's a big deal. Like all these guys are coming to vouch for him, right? And he was best friends with a guy named Jim Valvano, who they started a foundation after he passed of cancer. He was a former basketball coach as well and an ESPN personality. And they started the V Foundation. And they raised money for cancer research. But in his farewell speech, if you've never seen the speech, you should look up, anyone listening, Jim Valvano ESPY Awards speech, ESPY. It's a speech he gave.
It was beautiful.
A couple months before he died. But one thing that he says in the speech that I don't know if you could say it any better, is he says, but think about it. If you laugh, you think, and you cry, that's a full day. That's a heck of a day. And so, I think like if you can bring those experiences to people's lives and experience that with them, the joy, the laughter, sometimes heartbreak or something, like that's human connection. And really, honestly, what drew me, I tried to make my first story because I thought it'd be interesting, but what drew me back over and over and over again was the human connection. I love the relationships I gain and the people I meet and the stories I get to tell and the things I learn from connecting with human beings. So, yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about another person that I think everybody listening is going to know. And they're going to know this person through the movie called Rudy. We've all seen the Rudy, right? The underdog. Well, last year I had Rudy come out and speak at one of our masterminds. Now, I'd never met Rudy, but prior to having a speaker come out to a mastermind, you do a lot of research on somebody. And, what I found out about Rudy was he's just a damn awesome guy, and he can tell stories. But you did some work with Rudy. So can we talk a little bit about Rudy, how he inspired you? And just so everybody knows, like Rudy, the movie was based on Rudy Rudiger's, and if I'm saying it right, Rudiger's life story and his dream to play football at Notre Dame. So you did some stuff with that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Rudy is a great guy. We talk almost every day. And we'd still do stuff together, and he's awesome. Look, Rudy is a really fantastic human being, and his story is incredible, and the real story is even better than what made it on film. I mean, it's a great composite of things that happen, but when you hear the stories of like how hard it was, it took him 10 years to get that movie made, and Notre Dame almost banned it from campus. They made him sign a document that says, if you ever mention the word movie here ever again, we're going to ban you from campus. And then when he got the movie deal, they're like, great, let's go shoot at Notre Dame. He's like, guys, I got to tell you something. And so, in the documentary, we count all that stuff. But, and then here's a typical example. I was doing Rudy's documentary. He was like, hey, Dickie V's a Notre Dame guy. Dickie V's a Rudy fan. You should reach out to Dickie V and interview him. So I did. And then I said, hey, Dick, I didn't know his story of having one eye, starting out and coaching high school basketball, coach 2 state championship back-to-back teams in the state of New Jersey, goes to start coaching at University of Detroit, takes them to the big tournament, and they'd never been before nor since. Then he gets hired by the Detroit Pistons. He gets fired. He ends up going into broadcasting, didn't want to. His wife talked him into it. He broadcast the very first college basketball game ever on ESPN. He's been there ever since, right? But I was like, man, I need to tell your story. He's like, okay, let's talk about it. And so it's just like a constant, it becomes a web of, because no one says, hey, you're making a documentary, you should interview my deadbeat cousin. Like, this is just not what happens. It's like, oh, have you met the governor? Or have you, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, it's so much fun. Yeah, Rudy's a great dude. And proud of that documentary. It's a lot of fun. It's on Amazon Prime. You can see it. It's called Rudy Rudiger, The Walk On. And yes, Rudy is a damn good person.
Let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about Emmys. So you got quite a few of them, 22. I'm not in the space, so I don't know anyone else that ever had 22 of them, but out of all the Emmys, what was the most significant one and why?
I think I have to say I don't know, I can pick one. It's like children, but we'll start here. I'll riff on it for a second. Number one, because I knew it was possible. And then number two, really, because I knew it was possible again, right? It wasn't just a fluke. So it was like when I won the first one, I was nominated for 2 at the same time, and I'm nominated for the film and nominated for directing. Well, the film lost, and that was earlier in the night. So I was like, well, and we made this really touching short film about a little boy with Down syndrome who plays t-ball, and I was like, if that doesn't win, I quit. I don't know what, and this is my first film, right? So I'm like, I don't know what to do. If that's not going to get people feeling good, I don't know what does. And then later on in the night, they called director. I'm like, well, my film didn't win. There's no way I won for directing. And I won for directing. And there's been so many times up until Emmy 15 or 16 maybe. I never won for directing and the film. I always won for either or. So it showed me it was possible. One of the things I will tell you, look, everyone here should be on the lookout for awards and recognition all the time. Because they don't just happen. You have to submit. You have to have someone nominate you. But it's your job to see what's out there, right? And then when you enter things like that, it's something most people don't think about. But I learned the hard way I lost a bunch of awards that I actually had just entered in my life in different ways, in songwriting and other things. I realized I just entered the wrong category because I thought the category meant something different than it did. But anytime there's an award, I won't say anything, but 99.9% of the time, you could call the office that runs the awards and ask them questions, and they will tell you very clearly. They can't tell you I have influence over the awards, or I can't tell you what to do, what to make a movie about, or whatever. But they will tell you, oh yeah, this doesn't fit in the XYZ category. It fits in this one, and then always I would say, as long as you can afford it, enter as many categories as you're eligible for. Because again, had I not entered both of those categories, I may not be sitting here today. I might have gotten, I don't think I'd have gotten frustrated and quit, but I definitely would not have had like that, as Matthew McConaughey calls green lights, right? I wouldn't have that green light, like, here you go, maybe you should do some more of this. And so there's a few tips on awards there.
I love it. I love it. So, you have the ability through your podcast, and just so everybody knows, because you should really check this out. He's the host of Now to Next podcast, but on your podcast, you get to interview all sorts of people. But let's just say you were able to ask, we'll say God, for one interview with someone that you have not interviewed. Who would that person be? Who would be your ideal interview?
That is a great question and really hard. It's
That's like, all right.
I'm now at the point where there's almost nobody I can't talk to, and I'm not impressed by celebrity anymore. I mean, I think we all are as kids or whatever, and maybe people now. But I'm really impressed by celebrity experts. I'm impressed by people who are so good at what they do, the world can't ignore them. And so I've had enough amazing conversations with, like, for me, like I had breakfast with Vince Gill a couple years ago, and Vince Gill now tours with the Eagles. He's one of the greatest songwriters, one of the greatest guitar players, one of the greatest vocalists of all time ever, and he's just the nicest guy. I was with a friend, and my friend ordered, we were at a diner in Nashville, it was breakfast, and my friend ordered sausage, and the lady goes, is turkey sausage okay? And she's like, yeah, that's fine. And Vince Gill goes, stop. He goes, do you really like that stuff? He's like, does anyone really like turkey sausage? She's like, well, not really. He's like, give her some of mine in the back. He brings in his own sausage because he doesn't want to eat turkey sausage, which is just a funny story. But like, he was just such a great guy. And so now I've met so many people and had so many amazing conversations, and everything from Navy SEALs, and I've been on human trafficking documentaries and a couple of them raids. I've been to Iraq and Colombia and Mexico and Haiti. And so I've spoken with people at the top of their game in many, many, many fields. There's a lot of people I'd love to meet and have a great conversation with, but I don't. I wouldn't care to meet them just to get a photo. Like, if we're not going to have a conversation, like, I'm a huge fan of, like, just as a guitar player as a kid. Like, I met B.B. King before he passed away. Like, that was a moment. That was incredible. I would love to meet Eric Clapton. From what I understand, he's sort of a recluse because since his son died and other things, whatever. But like, musicians would really probably be my top. I'm a huge Florida Gators fan. I have not met Tim Tebow yet. I would definitely love to.
He would be interesting.
He'd be a really good one. But it's like, at this point, I'm too afraid to give up my request if God's given me just one. So if I had 24 hours to decide, or if said in the next 30 seconds, you got to pick someone or it goes away, there's some people I would pick. I mean, look, having breakfast with Larry King, which ended up becoming a partner on my TV show, like, just freaking epic. Just some of those moments you sit down and go, how did I get here? Like, this is crazy. Like, so there's been so many of those. So I think I have so much gratitude for who I've been able to hang out with and meet. And it's not just me. It's like, I love the fact that I get to interview these people, and I get to go deep. Like, when I do the interview, I can go anywhere I want. One of my most fun interviews ever was Anthony Scaramucci, the Mooch. Like, it was so much fun. And he's a great guy, by the way. He made some boneheaded decisions, but a great guy. So hard one to answer, but that's my answer.
Whatever you ask of life, life will give you. You just got to be patient to get it. So Matthew McConaughey's been on my list after reading his book, and obviously you can't not really like the guy's movies. I just figured I'd throw mine out there. But a lot of people that don't travel a lot for work probably love traveling, but when you do it every single week or every single month of a year, you get burned out. Like, I have to get on a plane tomorrow, and I just don't want to go. I want to be around the people. It's going to be an unbelievable mastermind, but I have a 19-month-old, and you have children too. It's just so hard to disconnect and want to leave, no matter how good the event is. So you've come up with kind of a blueprint. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And so, to be very honest, my wife helped me come up with a blueprint because I could be gone with what I do and just excitement and adventures and invitations. Like, I could be gone 31 days a month. I could be gone 32 days a month. I mean, it'd be easy. Like, so, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I guess it is now. I guess no one can check it anyway. But about 10 years ago, it feels like, where she basically was like, we just had our third child. So my daughter's now 10. I have two older boys, 14 and 16. And, I started getting really busy. And when you get successful, and especially when you're speaking and doing other things, like, and before Zoom was a thing, right? You have to go, like, and so she understood that, but she, at one point she said, look, we got married for a reason because we like spending time together, and we now have 3 children that require quite a bit of effort, and I really need to remind you that while I love what you do and love that you love what you do and respect that you have to earn a living for our family, like, basically none of us signed up for this life without you, so we really need to sort of come to some fair terms of like just thinking through like what's reasonable for us and our family, and that was a great conversation. I mean, it needed to be had, right? And I was like, okay. And so we started talking about it, and we came up with 7 nights a month was reasonable. And if I missed dinner, that would count as half a night because I wasn't really home to enjoy the family. I was just, if I came home at 10 o'clock after bedtime or something, like what good is that?
It's none.
So we just sort of came up with this formula, and that's a week a month essentially, right? But I'm typically never gone more than 2 nights in a row, I would say. Like I did a movie documentary with Vishen Lakhiani in Mind Valley, and I told him I'd come I did the documentary, did well. I told him I'd come to the premiere. The premiere was in Ibiza. And so I went to Ibiza for one night and flew back home. I went for the premiere and came back. And it's like, I just slept on the plane and ate and drank and watched movies. Like, it's not hard work being on a plane. You're just sitting there. And so I'm willing to I take a lot of 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. flights to get somewhere the same day, so I don't have to go the night before. I'm willing to take bad flights, right? And so it's been a really good guiding principle since COVID happened, and there was about 6 months where I just couldn't do anything practically because of all the regulations, and everyone's so worried, and people were canceling shoots and losing a ton of money like everybody else, by the way. I was not unique in that. When things started to come back, we did get more lax on that system because all of a sudden, like I had 6 months to make up for, and so we're getting back to that system now, and it's getting back to that's I find is healthy. I have a couple rules in life. More than a couple, but a couple that I'll mention here. Like anything you invite me to, if it's not at least 50% fun, I'm out. Like I don't want to do it. Like so, everything I create or I host, even masterminds, where it's gonna be 50% fun. Like it's gonna be fun.
Totally.
And then I need one adventure a week. It's just the way I am. I gotta have one. Like so, this week, I went to Nashville and interviewed Kenny Chesney and came back. I left my house at 6 a.m. in the morning. Was back Monday night by 10 o'clock. I was able to watch the second half of the National College Football Championship with my family. So done. Then the Miami thing came up yesterday. I had to go, but that's rare. But yeah, it's just setting boundaries, and they honestly make you make better decisions. Because if not, it's like, oh yeah, you want me to come to this thing and meet this person, and you go, well shoot. I got this shoot over here. I got this film shoot paying me money over here. And I got this invitation here. Like, this one, it just makes you make better decisions, right? And so, and I think 7 nights is enough to get stuff done. And also, you realize very quickly that the world does not revolve around you. And in many cases, you could send someone else. Like, you don't, some things you need to go to, some things you want to go to. But there's a lot of cases, as long as it gets done, even the clients are happy,
I agree with that. And, I remember reading Gary Keller's book, The One Thing. And in that book, the biggest thing that rang out to me is he said, you have to start saying no to more things so that you can say yes to the right things. And Nick, I got a question for you. You got 3 kids. How have you brought your children into this journey and into this entertainment world and all these experiences? Because that's something, having a 19-month-old, a little girl, I'm starting to really think like, I do all this stuff. How do I make her part of all of that? And I struggle with it sometimes. Maybe she's just too young, but how have you done it?
I learned in some cases the hard way, and sometimes by watching other people go through it, that just because I want to bring them along doesn't mean they want to come along. That's one thing. You have to think about that, because like I always said, like, so I got married to my wife at 22. We had our first son when I was 25. And we were broke during all that time and all that stuff. And so, like, in many cases, then I started traveling, and then I started speaking. I get hired to speak in Hawaii and go to New York City and, like, go to places that we would have dreamed to go, like, as a couple, as, like, vacation. And I was like, man, and, we just can't right now because the kids are here. And then but one day, I'm not wishing them to grow up too fast, because it definitely is too fast. Having a junior in high school now, like, I can't believe that. But, like, it's like, I'm like, oh, well, one day she'll just come with me. And then now, like, that, not my youngest is 10, so we're still a ways from that. But now that I look at that, most of the time, like, she wouldn't want to come with me. I'm working most of the time when I travel. I mean, she would enjoy maybe the good meal I'm gonna have, but like she'd probably much rather sleep in her own bed and maybe go out to dinner with a friend than me drag her to some event where I'm speaking or filming for 10 hours a day and I get to see her at night and then I'm thinking about what I'm supposed to be doing for the event or the another person the next day, right? And so that's been really important to me, is just really thinking about like what do they want to do. I don't like being gone on a Friday night or a weekend, because that's like when everyone comes home from school, they're excited, it's a weekend, it's just a great family time, right? And it's just sort of depressing when you're not there, and they feel it when you're not there, right? And so, unless you're an a-hole, I guess, and they don't want you there, but so far they still like me. And so I started fishing when I moved on a lake like 5-6 years ago, and you would never guess it by my personality, but like I'm addicted to fishing. I absolutely just love it. I would do it over maybe anything else. There's a guy who brought a couple people brought their kids with them. And I realized that they couldn't, it's depending on the age of the kid, but they thought it was a great bonding time. But what it looked like to me, I don't know what their perception of the event was, or what they got out of it. But to me, when I was monitoring it and going, should I do that with my kids? I was like, you know what? They're basically can't quite immerse themselves in the group and can't quite spend enough time with their kid because they're like trying to do both. And it's just so, I think a lot of it, man, is just trying to be intentional. There's definitely trial and error, but I think it's just a really good question to ask yourself, like, does my child want to be brought along for this? And, like, I've been an entrepreneur since the day I was born, pretty much, right? Just the way I am wired. And I'll tell you, when my son turned 16 was like a really clarifying moment for me, because I'm an immigrant. My family moved to Orlando area when I was 1 from Barbados. My parents, I always tell people, we had more love than we could spend, but there were some hard money times. Like, we were never like homeless or anything, right? But it was like, we're middle class, but there's some times that I recall being like not feeling good about it. So anyway, when I had to save my money, I had to buy a car, I had to work to pay for my insurance and my gas. I just like, that was I learned hard work and some things. I used to have to work on weekends or evening nights from school, and I was training as a hardcore tennis player, state ranked and all that stuff. And so when my son, I've always said, like, I'm not buying my kid a car. Like, you don't come out of the womb and get a car. Like, it's just not like, hey, you're my son, you get a car. And yes, could I afford it? Yeah. And then as he was getting closer and closer to 16, I actually got smarter, and I said, well, look, let me think back on my scenario and think about why were things for me the way they were. Well, my parents were sort of struggling to make ends meet on their own and to help pay, to pay for my tennis and to, all the things that parents do, school clothes, just normal things. And I had to ask myself the question, like, if my parents could have helped me more, would they have? And it was like an unequivocal yes. It was like, yeah, absolutely. I bet they wish. I mean, I know that they were thankful that I got the life experiences from working and stuff. But I bet they wish that I didn't have to endure that pressure of AP classes and tennis and working and paying these bills for my car and stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, so it was a really big realization to me that, like, you know what? I have to realize that my story is not his story. And that's like I think it's a lot harder thing to distill and figure out on your own than, it probably sounds obvious when I say it, but it was a really big realization for me. Like, okay, so now the lens that I've got to process things for my kids through is like, well, what's, and again, with my faith background, like, what's God calling them to? Because I find a lot of entrepreneurs like bring their kids to like the ClickFunnels conference. Like, does that kid really want to do that? I mean, they want to please you for the most part until they rebel or whatever, but like, if my kids want to do anything that's of course safe and healthy, like, I will help them go as far as they want to go, that their level of talent, their brain will go to. But like, I'm not going to push things on my kids just because I think certain things I will, like, you got to eat right, you got to exercise it, like basics. But like, again, you got to ask yourself, like, what's good for them, what's right for them. And I've just seen a lot of people create a lot of anxiety in their kids' lives because they just don't see it. They're so wrapped up in what they're doing. I'm trying to not use any judgmental words because a lot of times it's not intentional, right? But they're just so engrossed in what they're doing, they can't possibly understand why their kid wouldn't want to do it or their spouse wouldn't want to do it, and that usually ends up in a whole lot of regret. So that's just my advice for a new dad.
It's great advice. I think about it a lot. I think about it, and I loved how you talked about, you grew up without money, but then you're thinking, okay, well, maybe, I should make my son pay for a car and go through some of those things because it'll build them, it'll build character, it'll show them that, not everything in life is easy. But then you're thinking, if my parents had the ability to not, or had the ability to make my life easier back then, would they have? And that was, I've never heard anybody say that, but that was really pivotal because I grew up, in a very similar background. Family had no money, and everything was a struggle. My gosh, it was, I think the most common word I ever heard, we're not heating the outside. We're up in Buffalo, so it's pretty cold, but you know what I mean?
I had to ask myself too. I'm like, well, what have I asked him to do? I've said I told him, I said, your job is school. And if you do well at school, of course, we'll support you in sports. So, the kid has a 4.3 GPA, playing 3 varsity sports. He goes to a smaller school, but he's playing 3 varsity sports, so he's always playing sports, and he's a good kid. So, he's doing his job really well. So, do I, that deserves a reward. That deserves recognition. And I told him, if you do your job, you get paid in life. And so I did say, look, I want you to have skin in the game, so here's the deal. I want you to pay $5,000 towards it, and if you will, I will pay the difference for a Tesla Model 3. A Model 3 is not inexpensive, but it's base models when I got it was $35,000. And so, look, even if you finance it out, it's $500 a month once he paid the $5,000 down. And I'm never gonna have to buy him gas, never have to get him an oil change, never have to get the car serviced, and he can take the car to college and he takes really good care of it. He's a good kid, but also I do believe it's always helpful when he had to save his money for multiple years.
That's what I like about it. Yeah.
To get the 5,000. So that to me was a stretch for him, but attainable, right? And so I think a lot of times what we have to figure out as parents, here's another one for you, is how do we get, because every breakthrough for our kid is just on the other side of what they feel like is impossible. But we all feel that oh my God, I can run a marathon, or oh my gosh, I can't, whatever it is, right? But some people, man, they set these markers. If the marker for my son was, you got to buy a car and it's $25,000 and you have no credit, that's just a formula for disaster. He's not going to learn anything from that. So again, I think it's just thinking these things through.
I think that's really cool. Some parents would just say, I'm just going to get them the Tesla because they have the means to do it. But you were like, listen, here's the barrier. It's not out of reach. It's very obtainable. And even if he thought it was out of reach, you could have said, hey, let's reverse engineer this and do it. And then once he got it, boom, he's got that beautiful Tesla. I love that because it accomplishes so much, and it shows that there's work in this, but there's also rewards in putting the work in. Yep. Let's change gears here to entertainment. You're in the entertainment world, and pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, it was a totally different world. My gosh. I mean, I'm getting older. I'm 44 now, but I've seen so many changes in the entertainment world. And now, that we're in the middle of this, or some people say pre-post, but whatever you want to call it, things are so drastically different. The landscape is so different. How are you adapting to that? How is everybody adapting to that in your business?
It's really interesting because everyone's adapting differently, but it's just funny for traveling. In some places, and it doesn't even really matter the state, you would guess certain cities are more strict than others, and they are, but
I live in New York, so we can just get that one right out of the way. It sucks here.
Yeah, but in certain places, it's like COVID doesn't exist. In certain places, it's like it's the end of the world. And I think that's probably a good metaphor for almost everything in life, right? And so, man, all I've chosen to do is just affect what I can and roll with the rest. Because I'm really glad I'm not in charge of the world and in charge of everyone driving on the road, and if they stay on their side of the road, and so I just sort of surrendered to the fact that what, this is just where we're at, and just try to be smart, and I have my own beliefs about things, but you really got to give other people space to have their own beliefs about it, whether it's the vaccine or whether it's masks or not masks or whatever, and that's cool. I think that I think that's good. I mean, I think that's what the world's made of. And so, but it is frustrating sometimes when someone is on an extreme. I had a situation the other day when a guy who we were going to do some filming with in his home, and a really talented cinematographer, just on 2 different sides of the aisle. I find myself in the middle most of the time, but one of them one of them, the cinematographer said, "Hey, is everyone taking a COVID test?" And I asked the guy who they were going to interview, and he's like, "Dude, we're all vaccinated. I'm not taking a COVID test for someone else to come into my home." And I'm like, I understood both points. And this guy's like, "Hey, I live with someone who's vulnerable." And I said, "I get it, dude. I don't shoot the messenger on either side. I just ask the questions, you know." And so anyway, it's I just try to be reasonable and do what feels right, and make sure I give other people the space, whether I believe what they believe or not, which doesn't matter, to do what they are comfortable doing. And I don't think you can do anything else, really.
No, I think that's a good place to be. It's really difficult, and I've seen it tremendously up here in New York. It is very divided. There's very strong opinions on both sides. It's an interesting time, and we're all going to look back on this, and we're going to learn a lot from it because, hey, in life, failures are learning lessons. We've all failed a lot during this, and we've also learned a lot in doing this, and we're not done. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's ever going to freaking be done at this point. But the final question I have for you, and then we'll wrap this show, is what would you say is the single biggest catapult you had in your life? Your biggest breakthrough?
Well, so I'll say a couple things. I think I was prepared for that breakthrough that I'll tell you about, because of the collective work of whether I realized it or not of everyone in my life up until then. So like, certainly like I said, I have parents who still, I see them almost every day. They're super loving. They're emotionally prepared me. They didn't scar me for sure. I mean, they made some decisions I didn't like sometimes, or didn't let me do things, or the normal parental things. But like, I don't know how you would overcome. Thankfully I know people who have, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you how I would overcome emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. Like, that's different. So I was prepared I was happy enough to be looking for opportunity. And then, of course, I hate the term self-made, because none of us are. Again, whether you know it or not, there's a teacher who did something for you. There's a janitor who did. There's people who, whether you see them or not, are working behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to help you, whether you know it or not, right? They're conspiring for you. And so I think probably the biggest single catapult for me was when my business partner, who now we've been business partners for 20 years, he's 30 years older than me, he agreed to mentor me and go into business with me. Because what I'm learning now that I'm mentoring some other people, like, you don't always have the answers, but it just gives you do have experience. And a great coach, by the way, doesn't have great answers. They ask great questions, because really, most of the time, you're the only one who really has the answers. You have to find clarity with the right questions. And so that to me was just a confidence builder. I felt like I had, whether I did or not, I felt sort of like Dumbo's feather. Like, I had a security blanket. I had a guy who'd been there, done that, war tested. If I didn't know what to do, or if someone made me upset or rejected me, I just had somewhere to go and someone to talk to, and just and someone who had enough, now that I realize it now, enough emotional intelligence to help me not freak out about everything. Because, when you first start things, like, you're up and you're down, and I mean, it's just your stomach's turning, or someone says no or stops paying, or it's like, you think the world's going to end, right? And I mean, I still do that sometimes, but now it's like, the numbers have to be a lot bigger for me to become that, emotionally unintelligent. But it's a journey. But having someone there reassuring you, or someone there going like, you know what? You should fire that client, because they really are just a jerk. It's not you, it's them. So to me, that was, I would have to say, beyond just, being set up for looking for opportunity and being able to do that, being in a country where I can do that, being, having enough love and emotional support from people around me, that to me was just a big catalyst for me as well.
I love it. Nick, this has been awesome. So if the audience wants to learn more about you, get your book, or see some of the documentaries and the films that you've created, is there any one place they should look, or what would you suggest for that?
Yeah, I mean, so look, if you follow me on Instagram, it's just Nick Nanton, as long as you spell it right. It's all N's as in Nick. There's no M's in there like Mary. As long as you find me on there, you'll more or less know what I'm up to. And if you want to intentionally stay up with me, nicknanton.com, sort of, we update that, not as often as we should sometimes, but regularly. And if you sign up on my mailing list, you will know about things we're doing, other things, and then my podcast, you can subscribe there on YouTube. You can find me pretty much everywhere under Nick Nanton. And if you like it, please leave a comment, give it stars, whatever. I got plenty of films on Amazon Prime, got a bunch of stuff on YouTube. So yeah, I mean, hey, do take the level of commitment you'd like, and I have no problem earning that commitment. So go easy, and if you don't like it, that's okay.
I love it. All right. So everybody, we're going to put some of those things in the description so that you don't have to look very hard. We'll put the podcast, we'll put the link for the book, and we'll put his website so you can follow him, check him out, get on his newsletter just so you can stay up with what he's doing and you can be part of the next story. Nick, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It was a real honor, and have a blessed day.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So if you like this video, I urge you, check out my other videos by subscribing to this YouTube channel.
My mentors told me, Josh, you need to furlough at least 50% of your team or you're going to go out of business or lay them off. And I just refused to do it. I just felt in my heart it was just wrong and I wouldn't do it. And I didn't do it. And we're still here today and we're stronger than ever. What do you think my team thinks about me now?